is Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa. She's a combat veteran who served in the National Guard, and she now sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jake. It's good to be with you.
So you just came out of a briefing on the attack. What more can you tell us?
Well, we did sit down with General Dunford, and he gave an overview, a time frame of the events as they occurred, and also a good discussion about who was involved in that decision process and advising the White House. I think the president did make a good assessment, a good call on the situation, and it was a very surgical strike on the assets that were in Syria that were involved with this chemical attack against Assad's population.
And well, what did the administration officials have to say, or General Dunford, about any sort of larger plan, larger strategy, and any next steps?
Well, of course, they will be game planning that in the days to come. They have already started that assessment. But this was, again, I just want to remind everyone that this was a one-time attack on the assets that were used in a chemical weapons attack against the people of Syria. So it was in response to a very specific attack. It is not an ongoing operation.
Did General Dunford have anything to say about the possibility, and we're being told that the Pentagon's looking into the possibility, that Russian forces were actually involved in the chemical weapon attack against Syrian individuals earlier this week?
That investigation will continue. However, at this time, they don't have any concrete evidence that shows that Russia was involved. They have been complacent, I think, in a number of operations that have gone on in Syria, but there is no evidence to say that they worked with Syria on this specific attack.
As President Obama was weighing taking action against Assad's forces in 2013 after a chemical weapons attack killed more than 1,400 Syrians in the suburbs of Damascus, then citizen Trump treated the warning, quote, "The president must get congressional approval before attacking Syria. Big mistake if he does not." Obviously, President Trump did not get congressional approval before launching the attack yesterday. What about this situation has changed, do you think?
Well, I can't speak for the folks in 2013 or for the then citizen Trump's comments. However, I can say that I do think it was appropriate. He did involve discussions with members of Congress as well as his national security team in moving forward. We do know that the vice president will be coming back to Congress in upcoming days and laying out the case and the reasons they did engage on this particular mission. So again, I can't speak to citizen Trump's comments at that time, but I do believe in this specific instance that the president made the appropriate call.
President Trump said that the attack on Syria was in the vital national security interests of the United States. In 2013, after the large chemical weapons attack, you said that President Obama had failed to explain, quote, "why it is in our vital interest to use force in the midst of Syria's ongoing civil war." Has President Trump sufficiently explained in this instance why this attack is in our national interests and makes us safer?
I think he has. He has laid out the case, humanitarian atrocities, of course, the use of the chemical weapons, but we also have ISIS engaged in that region, and we simply don't want to see chemicals fall into the hands of ISIS operators. There's an ongoing civil war, but that paired with the ISIS threat makes it even more imperative that we make sure we're destroying any of those delivery systems, but then we also need to engage the United Nations and make sure that we can push for investigation throughout Syria and make sure that if there are residual chemical weapons that the United Nations is engaging, finding those weapons and making sure they're disposed of.
And lastly, Senator, President Trump said the other day that those images of beautiful little babies suffering after the chemical weapons attack changed his calculus on Syria and on Assad. Listen to what Hillary Clinton just said about that.
We cannot in one breath speak of protecting Syrian babies and in the next close America's doors to them.
Do you think that President Trump should also change his position on allowing Syrian refugee babies, children, and their mothers perhaps, into the United States?
Well, that is up to President Trump. However, I would state that many of those families that are coming from those countries, especially Syria, they wish to stay in their homelands. And I have spoken with Syrian refugees. I've done that in the past. And all of those that I spoke with had emphasized to me that they would stay in their home country if they knew they were safe. So I think it's important that we are interrupting what's going on, making sure that there are no more chemical attacks, but also getting to the root cause of the problem and making sure that they are protected from ISIS and from this horrible regime. I do support the use of safe zones. I think that's a wise decision and something we need to explore further. However, we need to have an overarching strategy with how we deal with Syria and other issues in the Middle East. We've got to get the root cause of the problem under control.
Indeed, the Secretary of Defense once said that the Middle East, including Syria, was a strategy-free zone. Senator Joni Ernst, we thank you for your time.